Should Christians support Israel? This is the title of your new book, and it's a great title. I think this is a battle, a debate a lot of people are having outside of the church, but obviously inside of the church. Should Christians do this? Why did you write this book?
I wrote it because I was concerned about Gen Z. I back in November had seen a piece, a polling piece that said that 51% of young adults said they thought Hamas was justified in its attacks on Israel. And that number went up to 60% in December. By then, I knew I needed to do something. I wrote an opinion editorial piece for the Daily Wire called "Congratulations, America, You've Raised a Generation of Terrorist Sympathizers," which got a lot of attention and led to the opportunity to travel to the land and spend time with citizen soldiers, with survivors, with hostage families, with leaders who could give me insight and help me grapple with the tough questions that Americans are grappling with about justice and social justice and just war and all of those kinds of things.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers have continued to be alarming. There have been a number of other surveys saying very similar things about Israel's existence. Which side are you on, essentially? Um, this is going to be a broader question. And then I want to get into your trip, talk a little bit about what you saw, what you experienced. But why do you think Israel is always at the center of our news, of our geopolitical issues? It seems like Israel is the thing that we're always talking about, and it doesn't change. In fact, since October, it's become an even bigger issue.
I think for people on the progressive left, Israel is a proxy for the United States. So you can't come right out and attack the United States because you'll lose support. But if you attack Israel, that's fine. And by doing so, you can attack the United States. The very same people who are going after Israel right now are the people who are the biggest critics of the United States of America. And I think that's why anti-Semitism has such traction in Gen Z. Only 16% of Gen Zers say they're proud to be Americans.
Yeah, well, and who has raised Gen Z, right? This goes back to this bigger question. And it's so interesting when we talk about these younger generations, we often, and you work with Gen Z, so you know this better than anyone, we tend to keep it in sort of a vacuum. Well, this generation's so terrible, they're so lost. I always go back to, well, who's the one who has raised them to be like, who are the people who giving them this information or leading them to believe these things about Israel or America? And obviously, Israel, from a prophetic sense, in the Christian realm, we understand as believers, and there are different viewpoints on Israel and prophecy, but that there is something significant happening, obviously, with Israel, its reemergence on the map. I don't know if you want to speak to that at all, but it would seem that that piece of evidence, just before you comment, is also lost on a lot of young people because younger people, Gen Z, they're not really seeing Israel as a fulfillment of prophecy so much, are they?
Oh, that is correct. They are not. There's so many issues here. This is why I wrote the book, and I want to offer it for free to anybody who's watching. Just go to summit.org/Israel, and you can get a copy for yourself because they're all there. You'll find all of the documentation, all of the arguments. It's I'm trying to be as objective as I can be, but I'm not skirting any very difficult questions. Look, we've done something right and something wrong with Gen Z. What we did right was help them develop a social conscience so that they want to pull for the underdog. That's a very American trait. But on the other hand, we haven't equipped them with the thinking skills to know how to see beyond the simplistic oppressor versus oppressed mindset view that they're being given by postmodern and Marxist professors at their universities.
Well, and that's the thing, right? And also keeping in mind, and again, you know this better than anyone, in addition to the universities, the education system, you have Hollywood and media reinforcing many of these things, these ideas, these secular ideas, these leftist ideas. These are things that are coming from every single facet around these young people to indoctrinate them. And so it is interesting to see even young Christians fall to some of this. But I want to talk about your trip to Israel because, as you mentioned, you had a chance to go. This was a little over 100 days after October 7th. What did you encounter there?
Well, the first thing I encountered, and this is chapter 2 in the book, Should Christians Support Israel? I try to just outline what the conversations were like. I think what really sticks with me is the brutality of the terrorist attacks. Watching video footage from CCTV cameras and other places, walking the streets of some of the communities that were attacked, talking with survivors. I realized that Hamas is an apocalyptic rape and death cult. There is no negotiating with these people. They do not care about the Gazans. They oppressed Gazans for decades. They only want Israel to be destroyed. That fulfills an apocalyptic vision for them. And they're willing to use any means, including sexual assault and murder, mutilation. It's horrible. I don't know, Billy, that I fully grappled with everything that I saw when I was there, but I'll tell you what, the people who are defending Israel are citizen soldiers. They are everyday people. If there is a lesson we can take away as Americans, it would be that. If you lose your we as a country, we the people, and you decide, oh, somebody else needs to take care of this, it's not my problem, then we lose. And that's why I'm encouraging as many people as possible, to learn, to study this, to get the book, to think about it, to get copies for all of their friends and family, especially for those in Gen Z, because we found that if you give young adults the facts, they change their minds about their anti-Israel stance.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear what you're talking about here because you have a situation where people literally paraglided, invaded into a country, raped, killed, murdered, slaughtered people, did all these horrific, evil things, and the country they came in and did that to then responded to try to stop the terrorist organization responsible for that. And somehow Israel, that country defending itself, has been painted to be the one that is genocidal, violent. It's a very bizarre dynamic in the news. And not to say that mistakes don't happen in war, that issues don't happen, but the point is that people who did the horrific thing, Hamas, it's as though we've taken all those labels and given them to Israel, it feels, at least from my perspective. Why do you think that inversion is allowed to happen the way that it has?
I think that's a super tricky question. Let me just give a fact that relates to the situation to set the context. John Spencer, who is America's leading expert on protecting non-combatants in a time of war, says that Israel has done a better job than any nation in history, including the United States and Iraq and Afghanistan, at protecting non-combatants. The problem is that people have embraced the idea that you really can look at the entire world through an oppressor versus oppressed mindset. And our professors say that Israel is the oppressor, Hamas is the oppressed. Therefore, it's a clear-cut moral case. Israel has always been viewed more negatively in every situation. Since 2015, there have been hundreds of UN um, re- reproaches. I'm not sure exactly what the term would be, but condemnations of Israel. And 10 times as many as all the rest of the world put together. It is Israel is the one Jewish state in the world. There are 57 Islamic states. But there are always people who look at everything Israel does more negatively. In Syria, more than 1 million people died in their civil war. If you Google Syrian atrocities and then you Google Israeli atrocities, you will find there are 4 times as many articles about Israeli atrocities as Syrian atrocities, even though 25 more times the number of people were killed in Syria than have ever been killed in wars against Israel.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many factors. It is complicated, and I want people to grab the book, but people, especially young people, asking this question of what do we do, right? You have a war going on. You do have innocent people who are going to die in war. How should believers respond to the Gaza war? What would you tell those young people in particular? Although I think this is a question people have across the board.
I want young adults, well, all Americans really, to recognize that we've forgotten the principles of just war. Death is horrible in war, but death is not the worst outcome of war. We all die eventually. And the Christian thinkers such as Aquinas and Augustine, who wrote about just war, said it is a worse outcome that evil is allowed to prevail because that creates misery for millions of people during all of their lifetimes. I think we need to look at what constitutes a just war. If Israel's war tactics become unjust, then we call them on it. It will be the responsibility of the world community to help Gazans rebuild their lives, to become unindoctrinated because they have been indoctrinated for decades by Hamas propaganda, encouraging them to kill Jews as one of the primary aims of their lives. And I don't know. I don't see a solution to this. I think when I was in Israel, that's the most frustrating part. I don't see a solution to it, but you can manage situations like this. The relationship between South Korea and North Korea is managed. The relationship between China and Taiwan is managed. The relationship between Israel and Egypt is managed. These are not solved, but you can find a way to move forward and bring prosperity and hope to people.
Yeah, just as we're talking about this topic, and I know this is another loaded question, I've thrown a bunch of those at you today, but what is not properly understood in your view about the historical issues that exist between Israel and the Palestinian people?
I think the one I hear the most is Israel was only formed in 1948, so it's not legitimate. There's a the Israelis are the only ones who have ever formed a nation in that land, and it happened 3,500 years ago. Jerusalem has only ever been the capital of one nation, and that is the nation of Israel. The nation of Lebanon was not formed till 1943, and it was a complete political fiction. Syria was not formed until 1944, Jordan 1945, Egypt 1946, 1947. The only reason the Palestinians don't have a state is because they refused to form one. They refused it in 1948, again in 1967, in 2000, and 2008. People don't understand that basic fact. And now you're in a situation where all of these nations that were just made up out of whole cloth surround Israel and threaten its existence every day. The fact that the United States is supporting Israel is the one thing that keeps Israel from being destroyed.
So the title of the book, Should Christians Support Israel? Obviously you think Christians should. And when you look at the history of this, I mean, look, if this were America, and I think Americans have to honestly ask themselves this, if what happened, and obviously we had 9/11, but if what happened on October 7th happened in America today, what do we think America would do in response to that? America would immediately react in response to that and do everything possible to hunt down the terrorist who did it. Would we not?
Well, try to imagine if you had people come across the border from Mexico and rape, murder, and mutilate 42,000 people and take 10,000 hostages. America would instantly be at war with the group that did that. And we would not settle until that group is absolutely incapable of fielding a military or governing in any way. That's precisely what Israel is doing. We just don't understand the scale because we don't understand how tiny and vulnerable of a country that is.
Well, I appreciate you joining us today. The book is Should Christians Support Israel? Lots of important details. Where can people go one last time to grab copies of that book?
I want to give a copy free to everybody who's watching the show. So just go to summit.org/Israel. You can put your address in there and we will send you a copy of the book.
Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Billy.